Drums, they're the most important part of your track. And if you're producing electronic music using a computer, then you probably realize that most of the time they sound kind of shitty. And you have to do a lot of work to make them sound good. And in this video, I'm going to show you the techniques that I use to try to make my drums sound good. We're talking about terms like holographic, 3D, depth. We're talking about like vibe, character, okay? Not things that you would normally like claim about a computer and the things that it's spewing out when you're working on music. So here we go. I'm going to show you guys my Ableton project, and I have a example here. This is just a straight up unquantized drums. I mean, and I say unquantized in terms of everything snapped to the grid. So it is fully quantized, but it doesn't have any sort of feel beyond just the straight up grid, okay? And then this is an example of some drums that I constructed out of the same thing. Yeah. Just a little bit more vibey, a little bit more character, a little bit more interesting, I think. Now, I'm going to delete that because we're going to start from scratch right now. And, you know, this type of thing might not work for all of y'all out there, and that's fine. Follow along, keep an open mind, and you might learn a thing or two. And if you do, like and subscribe. And if you don't, leave me a comment and tell me how much it sucks. All right? Either way, let's just try to learn something new and expand our knowledge here. So, 606 core kit. This is the pattern. And the first thing I want to do is take some of the boring quantized sounds and I want to apply a groove, okay? So a groove is what Ableton has called, like, what in a lot of drum machines is just swing. So, you know, you have in your groove pool all of these little options that you can choose. And there's some famous, you know, MPC style swing. And there's these like hip hop ones. So I'm going to play it and I'm going to show you how they sound, okay? Cool. So yeah, maybe I'll go for loosely flow. Because I don't know, I think it sounds cool. And basically like what you do is you audition things and then when you hit commit, it will move all of your MIDI into a new position, okay? See how it just makes these subtle movements? And that's what you need to make it sound more musical, yeah? Right? And you don't always stick to the grid. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do is open this up and we're going to take a peek at some of the individual elements here. So I have a hi-hat that's closed. Right here. Now, within this window, you can change a lot of things. You know, you can choke, you can change the volume, you can change the panning. But one thing you can't do is change that part of the pattern beyond what you're already working with here in this MIDI view. So I'm going to show you what I mean by this. If you just right click, you go extract chains, and you basically pull that part of the drums out and you have it on its own right here. And then you can like duplicate it, you can make it longer, you can add additional parts. you know? Have fun with it. And then what I like to do at this point is add a Midi effect to make it more interesting, okay? So we're going to go into our Midi effects and grab, under velocity, this one's called add some random, okay? Now, you can change the range and you can change how much randomness you want. And it's all graphically displayed here. And now if you have a lot of randomness, it can sound just like you're working with a really shitty drummer. But you can skew the MIDI to land more in like the upper ranges, okay? And you can also reduce the range, like so. And you can reduce the randomness a bit. And so then now you suddenly have like a really subtle effect on this one drum part, okay? And now if you're looking for more of a lo-fi sound, you might roll off some of the high frequency right there. And this just makes it sound a bit warmer, a bit more analog, as they say, because tapes can't capture those super, super high frequencies. And when you're listening to a lot of these old dance tracks that were recorded to tape or processed with tape machines, they're missing all that high frequency information, and you don't miss it when you hear it. You know, you don't miss it. You're happy that it's not there because it's just like too grating. All right. Now, you might want to add a little bit of reverb, okay? But the thing is that reverb really gets in the way of mixing a lot. And I think, especially when you're starting out, you're probably overdoing it if you're using reverb, because you may not be realizing just how much it's clouding your mix. And I like to just keep things super dry now. And if you want to add reverb, you can add reverb to one element of your drums and it will make the whole drum sound wet. And this applies to your whole track. Like you can have every single synth part be pretty dry and you can add one reverb to a pad and it'll suddenly sound lush and it'll give it that dimensionality and it won't cloud it and crowd it out, you know? And so maybe we'll wait for reverb until a bit later. Now, we can add a bit more of that that randomness to other percussive elements if we want. Say this cymbal. And I like to do some creative EQ using an overdrive, or I have some other plugins, but maybe we'll stick to the overdrive so that it's more accessible for folks out there. This is just like a very quick and dirty way to shape transient stuff and squash it a bit so that it's not sticking out so much in your mix. So that sounds terrible, but you can shape it with this EQ. And already, by cutting out some of that high frequency, we're pushing it back, right? Because, you know, when you hear a delay, for example, when you hear an echo in nature, each echo that's returned is cutting some of that high frequencies. And so high frequency stuff sounds more present than it really is, due to the way that humans hear it. And if you cut out some of those high frequencies, you're actually making it feel further away. And this is like a great psychoacoustic trick that you can use instead of reverb. for pushing the elements back in the mix. Okay. Now, let's apply some of this creative EQ to these tom sounds as well. Overdrive. Reduce the drive a bunch. And I don't always solo tracks, but sometimes it's good to hear what's happening. Cool. Now we'll copy this and go over to the high tom. And nice. So yeah, we're kind of just like dirtying things up and EQing the heck out of stuff. But I find, if you apply a lot of the same plugin across different elements of a drum sound, it'll sound more cohesive. So let's take this hi-hat combo, reduce some of the highs. Cool. And yeah, let's look at maybe adding some depth to the snare through EQ, or through delay. So here we're going to grab just this standard delay. So now we have that snare doing more work, right? We've got a little echo. Just very subtle, but subtlety is the key to this stuff, because drums are just one element of this track. We want them to be interesting. We want them to have a lot of subtle variations going on that are going to make this pleasant to listen to. Now we have this other snare, and maybe we'll do a classic reverb with a gate on this other snare. And this is just to display another technique that you can use. This is a classic 80s drum technique. So first we grab a reverb. Actually sounds pretty sick on its own, but if we add, the gate here, and we have a nice graphical EQ that shows exactly what the threshold is that it's engaging and the return. Dope. And then you could also dub that out with a delay. Nice. I'm going to reduce a bit of that wetness. Nice. All right. Now, we've got some really cool processing on the drums. The next tactic will be to add width. This is a trick that I use a lot. You'll hear it a lot in electronic productions. It's called the Haas Effect. And what this is a psychoacoustic effect where if you hear two elements that are basically two sound elements in the left channel and the right channel at the same time, they sound as though they're in the center, right? It's the center image, the phantom center, as we call it. But if you slightly alter them in timing, your brain will be able to hear one and then the other, and you'll immediately be able to pick up on the sense of the stereo width, okay? Now, when you're mixing dance drums, you want it to stay mono compatible because, you know, a lot of clubs, I guess, have mono systems, although in my experience, stereo is quite popular these days. But if, you know, you want your track, if someone's playing it in a warehouse or some, you know, friggin' janky club, you want it to sound great in mono. And so what I like to do is keep a lot of the core elements just mono, keep it simple, and then you add one thing that is super wide, and you can use a technique like this, like the Haas effect, and it will just immediately make your drums sound massively wide. Okay, so I'm going to use it on this snap. Okay. So I'm going to bring in a utility just to make it a bit louder. Just so you can hear it. Duplicate the track. Now, if we just slightly move one, and then pan left and right, nice. And I'm going to delete this utility because it's way too loud. Nice. Okay, so there you have it. That's the Haas effect, in effect. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is group everything, Command, grab them all, right-click, oops, and we're going to go Group Tracks. Now we have a group or a bus of drums. Label it. Always label your tracks. I don't always label my tracks, but I regret it when I don't. So here we go, drum. Now, there's the promised reverb from earlier, okay? So just a little bit of reverb on those snaps, and there's our spaciousness. Okay, next, thing I like to do. So already we've got it sounding really good. And honestly, you could leave it at this. But I'm going to show you some things that I like to do quite often that are just get it that little bit percentage deeper and more interesting to me. Here we go. The Vertigo Vsm3. This is a plugin. You can get it through UAD, or you can get it through Plugin Alliance. And I've been using it a lot. It's a saturator. And when you first bring it into a track, it sounds way too crazy. I mean, some of you out there might like that, but I like to tame it a bit. And so I like to go like this. And instead of impacting the low, I go on to the mids, and then I go on to the highs here with this third harmonic. And the reason I do this is because I think that with drum sounds for dance music, you don't always need to have a super deep kick, okay? Because a lot of the time you have a really awesome bass line and you want to let that live, okay? So I like to mix my drums to be a bit mids forward. Then you get good translation. People might hear your stuff on their friggin' cell phone for the first time and they'll be able to hear that kick. And that's fine. And then when it gets into the club, it's still going to sound super good because, you know, you'll have that bass extension and you'll have the mids and everything will be popping off. So we're going to play it. Oh. So this is without. And this is with. Just adds that like nice 3D saturation. I don't even know how it does it, but I love it. And then the next thing that you might want to do is put another compressor on there. I mean, these drum sounds are already compressed, right? Any drum machine on Ableton, those drums have been compressed to hell. And, you know, even if you look at this, the core kit, it has a freaking compressor that's engaged already. So you don't have to do this. If you feel like messing with compression more and you know what you're doing, then go for it. But otherwise, don't worry about it too much. I have this gnarly compressor that I've been playing with. It has a nice optical compression setting. And I like to do a parallel compression on the drums and really smash one of them. And then use this parallel mix here and just bring it in. So we're going to set it to 0. I'm going to set the threshold and the gain up. And we'll just see how this sounds. So when you're smashing something, you want these meters to really go. Now with the parallel mix, I'm going to turn down the gain a bit. And the last thing that I might do actually is go in and grab this kick and hit it with a bit of EQ, which, you know, you don't have to do this, but like I said, we're not trying to overload the bass on our drums because we're gonna have bass coming out the wazoo on this track later, right? So I think that it's okay to EQ some of the kick and get some of that insane sub bass out of there. Because even like this, if you blast it later on a system, it's gonna sound pretty bassy and that kick's still gonna thump. And there you go. So, if you are still watching, thank you for staying with me till the end of this tutorial. That's awesome. And I hope that it brought you some insights into mixing drums on Ableton and making them sound a little bit nicer and a little bit more interesting. If this video is valuable to you, like and subscribe to my channel. I love the support. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will always respond to your questions. Anyway, thank you so much and have a good one, y'all.